Hello, this is Donald, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 19th issue of the Toronto Star and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Police searches of buses ruled illegal. Northern Ontario officers stopped vehicles for weeks in search of drugs. By Jacques Gallant, Courts and Justice reporter. For 3 weeks, police in Thunder Bay effectively had free rein to stop any Ontario Northland bus rolling through the city, kick off passengers, search through their luggage with sniffer dogs, and access their personal information. But that was only thanks to a warrant that should have never been issued, a judge has ruled. In a ruling that highlights the challenges of combating the illicit drug crisis that has gripped Northern Ontario, while at the same time ensuring that police methods are compliant with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Superior Court Justice John Fregereau excluded 25 kilograms of cocaine found in a June 2023 in the luggage of a man who was traveling from Toronto to Winnipeg while the bus was making a scheduled stop in Thunder Bay. The OPP had granted a general warrant that allowed them to search any Northland bus stopping at 7 stops in Northern Ontario, including 4 in Thunder Bay, for drugs and guns during a 3-week period in 2023. But in his decision released last week, Fregereau concluded that the warrant was very broad and included no limits to ensure that police first had reasonable grounds to search a particular bus, giving police unfettered direct discretion to conduct random searches of dozens of buses impacting hundreds of passengers. He also found that the OPP had provided misleading information to Ontario Court Justice Elaine Burton, the judge who authorized the warrant, regarding the prevalence of drugs on Northland buses. Fregereau ruled that several of the accused man's charter rights had been violated. Once the cocaine was excluded, the Crown called no other evidence, and the man was acquitted of drug trafficking last week. The Star is not naming him as he is no longer facing criminal charges. I am acutely aware of the prevailing drug and opioid epidemic in Thunder Bay and throughout the Northwest region, the judge wrote. I am also aware of the need for police to utilize all means available, within the limits of the rule of law, to intercept the flood of drugs into the region and to prosecute those responsible. The accused man's lawyer, Nate Jackson, told the Star the ruling is not just important for his client, but for all Canadians. Yes, our communities are experiencing a devastating drug epidemic. These are desperate times, he said, but the measures we take as a society, desperate as they may be, cannot be unconstitutional. The measures we take must be lawful. Police action cannot breach our charter-protected rights and freedoms. The OPP did not return the Star's request for comment. The warrant required the police to explain its terms to passengers, kick everyone off, and then have the sniffer dogs go through their luggage. Police had to advise passengers they were free to leave while the search was ongoing. If a sniffer dog hit on a piece of luggage, police were to determine the owner, explain to them what they were doing, and advise them of their right to a lawyer. Police also granted Police were also granted access to the passenger manifest of any Northland bus traveling through the area during the 3-week period, containing personal information including phone numbers, email addresses, points of origin, and destination. Ultimately, 16 buses were searched, and hundreds of presumably innocent travelers inconvenienced and delayed, Figueroa wrote. Jackson argued that the warrant gave police a blank check to search through people's luggage and authorize mass detention while they waited outside the bus. When his client's bus was searched during a scheduled stop, police placed vehicles in front of and behind of the bus, and officers instructed all passengers to show their hands and exit the bus. The OPP's request for the warrant in 2023 came amid a significant increase in a number of drug traffickers coming to northwestern Ontario from the south with cocaine, crack cocaine, fentanyl, and crystal meth. In applying for the warrant, Detective Sergeant David George of the OPP said drugs and or firearms were arriving on Northland buses every day, but conceded while testifying this year in front of Figueroa that he had no evidence of that. Figueroa concluded that the police had provided misleading information to Burton, the lower court judge, before she issued the warrant. But then Burton failed to impose any limits to ensure police had a reasonable suspicion that would find drugs or guns on board before deciding to search a Northland bus, despite Burton asking the police to explain how they would determine which buses would be searched. In my view, the absence of any such limiting conditions on the execution of the warrant was, with due respect of the issuing justice, a failure to ensure that any search authorized by the warrant was reasonable in the circumstances, Figueroa wrote. The decision to search a bus was left up to George, who testified that analysts would first run a bus passenger manifest through police databases to determine if anyone may have a connection to drugs and or guns. On the day the accused bus was searched, analysts had flagged 2 potential suspects with criminal histories on the bus, neither of whom was accused, who wasn't even on the passenger manifest. Given his findings about the warrant, Figueroa concluded that the accused man's right against unreasonable search and seizure had been violated. He also found that the man was arbitrarily detained while police had told the passengers they were not being detained. Figueroa also asked in his ruling where exactly the passengers were supposed to go when their luggage was still on the bus. A reasonable person sitting on a passenger bus, observing police vehicles being parked in front and behind the bus, seeing numerous armed police officers board the bus, order passengers to show their hands, get off the bus, and go to a specified location under police watch would be ultimately intimidating, Figueroa wrote. The fact that all personal property was ordered to be left on the bus would exacerbate a passenger's concern. And finally, the judge said police violated the man's right to a lawyer by waiting 18 minutes to inform him of his right between when he was ordered off the bus and when he was arrested. I would not describe the police conduct in this case as willful or reckless disregard for charter rights, applicant wrote, Figueroa. On the other hand, viewed historically, I find that a series of charter violations collectively represents a significant intrusion of the applicant's charter-protected right to simply be left alone. CEO of real estate watchdog resigns. Insurer projects it only has funds to cover 50% of agents' claims. By Claire Feinstein, Business Reporter. The CEO of Ontario's real estate regulator is stepping down in the wake of a iPro Realty scandal. While realtors continue to wait for missing commissions following Premier Doug Ford promised to make sure that they got every single penny. On Thursday, the Real Estate Council of Ontario CEO Brenda Bachman made the personal decision to step down, effective December 31st, according to a statement from the provincially appointed administrator. I want to thank Brenda for her commitment and her contributions to RECO and wish her well in the future, said Jean Lepin in a statement on Thursday. Bachman in the statement said, while not an easy decision, I believe it is the right time for both me and the organization to begin a new chapter. Bachman's exit follows an announcement earlier this week from the regulator's insurer projecting a total loss of $30 million based on claims received to date. The insurer said it only has means to pay out realtors 50% of the road commission for the time being. Lepine was appointed by the Ford government to oversee the regulator amid widespread concerns about its ability to protect consumers from theft and fraud in the wake of the iPro scandal, which saw co-founders Rue Albes, a former RECO board member, and Fidel Colucci strike a deal with RECO to evade charges and fines after they illegally dispersed more than $10 million from the company trust accounts, which held consumer deposits. In September, court documents revealed $30 million had been diverted from the iPro accounts after looking at documents over an 8-month period, but found that $9.5 million shortfall in the trust accounts at the time. Lepine formally assumed control of the organization December 1st and dismissed all 8 board directors on his first day in the job. Since his appointment, there have been a strong push to pay impactful real estate agents who have been demanding their owed commission for 4 months. On December 17th, real estate agents began to receive payouts up to 50% on eligible insurance claims just in time for Christmas. But many realtors are disappointed they won't be reimbursed 100% of their lost commissions. It's like a kick in the teeth, said Stephen Schmerlich, who lost $21,500 in commissions after doing a transaction with iPro in the summer, a situation he said could have been prevented. RECO, which was informed of the shortfall in May, allowed Alves and Colucci to continue operating their business to mid-August, transacting more than $700 million in residential real estate sales before informing the public and freezing iPro's trust accounts, a Star investigation reported. It comes back to the fact that they didn't tell anybody when they could have, right? I could have had information that this company was going under, but they didn't do that. They deceived us, Schmerlich said. They weren't honest with the public and not honest with agents, letting business go on as if nothing happened. That's the part that's kind of inexcusable. RECO's insurer, Alternate Risk Services, said it has received more than 2,500 claims, but only around 1,000 of them have been assessed so far. Based on the claims received, the insurer projects a total loss of about $30 million and about $5 million in consumer deposit claims have already been paid out. This event is larger in scope and size than any that has occurred in 25 years of insurance program, AR Services said in an information notice on Monday, adding there currently isn't enough money under the program to fully pay back affected realtors. The combination of the $4 million insurance limit plus amounts expected to be available in the frozen iPro accounts are only sufficient to cover 50% of the estimated total commission claim amounts at this time. The notice said, adding that assessing money from the frozen accounts requires court approval. MPP Tom Rakocevic, the NDP critic for public and business service delivery and procurement, said in a statement on Thursday that, despite the government's promise that realtors be paid every cent, they are currently set to cover only half of their earned commissions. I have met with affected realtors who are facing severe financial strain through no fault of their own. They should not bear the cost of systemic oversight failures. The projected losses of $30 million are also much worse than initially expected, Rakico said. On December 1st, Ford said at a real estate industry conference that his government would work to ensure realtors are paid all their owed commissions. We're going to cover each and every single agent that's owed every single penny, he said. On Thursday, the Premier's office told the Star it is looking at options to fully remedy the situation. Brian Skurba, a former iPro agent who has worked in the industry for more than 15 years, said he's spoken with the Premier a couple of times after reaching out directly, outlining the financial strain he and other agents are under. He would not disclose to the Star how much commission he's owed. Skurba said Ford told him, "Whatever is not making you whole, the province of Ontario will cover it. You know," he said that to me twice. He added that Stephen Crawford, whose ministry oversees RICO, also told him the remaining amount of commission owed will be dealt with in the middle of January. For now, Skurba is putting his trust in the government to deliver on its promise. Nazi Mosini is owed $150,000 in commissions on real estate deals involving iPro and had 6 transactions from May to August before the brokerage shut down. She's frustrated with how much the insurance company and RICO have handled the situation so far, and doesn't understand how the total claims can come to $30 million when the shortfall in iPro's trust accounts was initially $10 million. Mussini and other realtors want a clear breakdown of the claims made, as they believe many to be based on deals that haven't closed yet. Realtors whose deals have closed should be served first, she said, as that money would already be in the bank accounts. The Star reached out to RICO to explain the discrepancy between the $30 million projected losses and $10 million. A RICO spokesman was not able to provide a clarification. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Are the odds favorable for Ford's casino plan? If the Premier builds it, more visitors may not come to the Falls. Rob Ferguson and Robert Benzie. Premier Doug Ford's big bet on more casinos for Niagara Falls may not pay off. Ford unveiled a new economic development scheme this week to boost tourism in Toronto, including new gambling houses in the honeymoon capital, in a bid to double the number of annual visitors at wineries, restaurants, and other attractions in the Niagara region. I'm thrilled to announce our government's Destination Niagara strategy, a multi-billion-dollar plan to build new world-class attractions, elevate Niagara's casino and gaming experience, meaning we want more casinos, big, large casinos to come here to premiere enthused Monday in the Falls. But given the myriad transportation challenges in getting to Niagara from Toronto, to say nothing about the competition from online gaming that has transformed iPhones into virtual casinos, our new in-person facilities needed or wanted. If the government of Ontario wants to return to using incentives for capital investment to grow the gaming business, there are opportunities from Windsor, Ottawa, Niagara to Thunder Bay to invest in gaming properties under the right circumstances. And the industry would welcome the opportunity to do that, said Paul Burns, President and CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association. There's a catch, however. To grow Niagara, you need to be able to get more people there first before you can build a casino, said Burns. While Ford has promised to one day widen the Queen Elizabeth Way, twin the Garden City Skyway over the Welland Canal, boost GO Transit service, and extend the runway and build a proper passenger terminal at the Niagara District Airport to lure regular airline service, such improvements are years away. No money has yet been earmarked for the projects. The reality is the main route to Niagara from Toronto will remain the busy and often jammed QEW, said Christopher Fullerton, professor of geography and tourism studies at Brock University in St. Catharines. It's very vulnerable. It just takes that one accident or that one incident to cause chaos for the rest of the day, Fullerton added. Beyond access, there's a question about the market for more gambling facilities. There are already two casinos in Niagara Falls, Casino Niagara and Falls View, operated by U.S.-based Mulligan, as well as a Seneca Niagara Resort and Casino right across the river in New York State. So it's unclear whether there are enough gamblers for even one more on this side of the border. Ford criticized Mulligan, which signed a 20-year pact to run Niagara facilities in 2019, for not investing more in the region. We need to do better, 100%. Mulligan is ragging the puck. They've got to make a decision. You either on board or you're not. It's simple. I'm tired of screwing around. Sorry for the language, the premier said. So we're going to put that out there. All the big casinos in Las Vegas were serious. We're serious. It's happening. Get on board. Come and put in a proposal in. Come and tell us how you're going to build a billion-dollar hotel with attractions, with cinemas inside, with live theater. That's what we're looking for. Casino itself is good, but it's everything else that comes along with the casino. In a statement to the Star, Mulligan, whose officials were not part of Ford's splashy announcement at the Table Rock Center near the famous falls, would only say it is in talks with Ontario Lottery and Gaming about next steps. According to OLG's latest financial statements, net income from land-based gaming fell to $988 million in the last fiscal year, down from $1.12 billion the previous year. The people going to casinos are down. The Niagara Falls MPP Wayne Gates, a new Democrat. I think brick and mortar casinos are certainly in trouble. On traffic, Gates said getting back to his riding from the legislature in Toronto can be arduous even on weekdays unless he can leave well before the afternoon rush hour. The drive is 3.5, 4 hours, and it's worse if it's raining or snowing, he added, noting the weekend trips are just as bad as travelers from the GTA crowd the QEW on the way to Niagara for theater, winery tours, and other events. The district airport in Niagara-on-the-Lake, a 15-minute drive from the falls, admitted its shortcomings in a recent update of its master plan. The terminal is small. There are no passenger screening facilities. There are no permanent custom facilities, and the runway is too short for many commercial aircraft. Nevertheless, the vision to bring 51,000 flights and 574,000 passengers a year by 2045 after a full upgrade of the property in the heart of the wine country. Holiday rush. Toy maker in a panic after shipment of dolls derailed in the Rockies. By Sheila Reed. In the remote, jagged edges of the Rocky Mountains, somewhere along the border between British Columbia and Alberta, lies a scattered shipment of about 4,000 dolls that won't find a home this holiday season or ever. Samantha Ong, the founder and CEO of Joey Dolls, which makes culturally inclusive dolls, says her Toronto-bound shipment containing orders she had anticipated for the peak holiday season was lost in a Canadian National Railway derailment in early November. Ong and her family have since been on a mission to bring as many dolls as possible from the U.S., where she has extra stock, in the hopes of making up for the uninsured cargo that she says retails for more than $200,000. Ong says she first learned something was wrong on November 10th after receiving an email from the Canadian National's CN co-loader SM Line, a Korean logistics coordinator that combines smaller shipments from different companies into a single containers. The email said that the container holding Ong's product was on a bad CN rail car, but would be back on track after repairs were completed. It wasn't until November 19th, she says, that she was informed of the train accident that happened on November 5th, making the transportation of her container that had sustained significant damage impossible. This loss is completely devastating and such a blow to the holidays, said a tearful Ong via Instagram. I am still processing the reality of it all. This is a busy season of Joey Dolls, with both Lunar New Year and Christmas looming, and the shipment contained all pre-ordered dolls for the season and then some. She was anticipating a boost in sales after filming an episode of Dragon's Den, a show where entrepreneurs pitch their businesses to a panel of Canadian business moguls. The episode featuring Joey Dolls is expected to air in the new year, providing the kind of national exposure Ong was sure would translate into more sales. Ong says she didn't purchase cargo insurance for the shipment that originated in China at the advice of her freight forwarder, another intermediary that handles shipping logistics, who told her the risk of losing a shipment is very low. I had no idea that the train derailment was such a frequent thing, says Ong. I think more people should know that. Ong's business is still new. She came up with the idea for Joey Dolls in 2020 when she was struggling as a wedding photographer with no weddings to shoot during the pandemic. As anti-Asian racism rose during this time, Ong said she noticed a gap in the market that was still dominated by stereotypical dolls. Her company offers plush representations handmade in China from 7 Asian cultures: Vietnamese, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Indian, Filipino, and Cambodian, as well as a Mexican doll. I wanted the dolls to really be authentic so the children can connect to their culture at an early age, she says. Despite this setback, Ong is determined to get those dolls into children's hands this season. She recently drove to the border to receive as many dolls as possible from a warehouse in Buffalo, New York, to fulfill holiday orders. Ong says she was rejected trying to re-enter Canada at the Rainbow Bridge at Niagara Falls, only to turn around and be rejected trying to re-enter the U.S. My kids were terrified, Ong says in intense interactions at the border during the 2-day rescue mission. After 2.5 hours of pleading with U.S. border officials, Ong says she and her family were permitted to travel to the Lewiston Bridge, about 10 kilometers from the border crossing at the Rainbow Bridge, and re-entered Canada, dolls in tow. The loss has cost her close to $50,000, yet she feels fortunate for the community rallying around her, offering guidance and helping to contact customers. Knowing this response from the community, we can't give up, says Ong. We have to keep going and make sure we continue to provide representation that people are grateful for. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Ethics Probe. Watchdog to investigate minister over skills fund. Robert Benzie, Queen's Park Bureau Chief. Ontario's Ethic Watchdog has launched an investigation into Labour Minister David Piccini related to the controversial $2.5 billion Skills Development Fund. Integrity Commissioner Catherine Motherwell's office said Thursday she is conducting a probe after the opposition, New Democrats and Liberals, complained that the Progressive Conservative minister violated the Members' Integrity Act. The inquiry is in response to two separate requests from Merritt Stiles, leader of the official opposition, and MPP for Davenport, and Stephanie Smith, MPP for Toronto, St. Paul's, the Motherwell spokesman Juliet Kadevi. The request ask the commissioner to determine whether David Piccini, Minister of Labor, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, contrived sections of the Act in relation to an application and selection process of the Skills Development Fund training stream, said Kadevi. As the two requests cover similar subject matter, the Commissioner has decided to deal with them together under one inquiry. As required by the Act, a report will be filed with the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario once the inquiry has been concluded. Piccini has always denied any wrongdoing related to how money from the work training fund was dispersed. In a statement, his office said, "We are continuing to assist the Integrity Commission with their work on the file." The Skills Development Fund has so far trained nearly 700,000 people for good paying careers in sectors such as manufacturing, skilled trades, and healthcare, and helped more than 100,000 people find good paying jobs within 60 days of completing the program, Pacini's office said. Stiles and Smith filed their separate complaints to Motherwell after Auditor General Shelley Spence issued a special report earlier this fall noting that Tories doled out funds to poorly rated applicants in a manner that was not fair, transparent, or accountable. In her request for the investigation, the NDP chief said it was time for an ethics probe to shine a light on what looks like a pay-to-play scheme that is rewarding insiders to the tune of millions while workers lose out on opportunities. Smith's complaint warned there was an appearance of conflicts of interest, improper influence, or the use of insider information. Former NASCAR driver, family among 7 killed in a plane crash. Aircraft was trying to return to airport in North Carolina. By Alan G. Breed and Gary D. Robertson. Statesville, North Carolina. A business jet crashed Thursday while trying to return to a North Carolina airport shortly after takeoff, killing all 7 people aboard, including retired NASCAR driver Greg Biffle and his family, authorities said. The Cessna C550 erupted into a large fire when it hit the ground. It had departed Statesville Regional Airport, about 70 kilometers north of Charlotte, but soon crashed while trying to return and land, the North Carolina State Highway Patrol said. Flight records show the plane was registered to a company run by Biffle. The cause of the crash wasn't immediately known, nor was the reason for the plane's return to the airport in drizzle and cloudy conditions. Biffle was on the plane with his wife, Christina, and children Ryder, 5, and Emma, 14, according to the Highway Patrol in a family statement. Others on the plane were identified as Dennis Dutton, his son Jack, and Greg Wadsworth. Each of them meant everything to us, and their absence leaves an immeasurable void in our lives, the joint family statement said. Biffle, 55, won more than 50 races across NASCAR's 3 circuits, including 19 at the Cup Series level. He also won the Truck Series Championship in 2000 and the Xfinity Series title in 2002. NASCAR said it was devastated by the news. Greg was more than a champion driver. He was a beloved member of the NASCAR community, a fierce competitor, and a friend to so many, NASCAR said. His passion for racing, his integrity, and his commitment to fans and fellow competitors alike made a lasting impact on the sport. The plane, bound for Florida, took off from the Statesville airport shortly after 10 a.m., according to tracking data posted by FlightAware.com. Golfers playing next to the airport were shocked as they witnessed the disaster, even dropping to the ground at the Lakewood Golf Club while the plane was overhead. The 9th hole was covered with debris. We were like, "Oh my gosh, that's way too low," said Joshua Green of Mooresville. It was scary. The National Transportation Safety Board and the Federal Aviation Administration were investigating. In 2024, Biffle was honored for the humanitarian efforts after Hurricane Helene struck the U.S., even using his personal helicopter to deliver aid to flooded remote western North Carolina. The last time I spoke with Christina, just a couple of weeks ago, she reached out to ask how she could help with the relief efforts in Jamaica. That's who the Biffles were, said U.S. Representative Richard Hudson, a Republican from North Carolina, said. Wadsworth was Biffle's friend and helped him with odd jobs, including delivering supplies to places hit by Hurricane Helene. Roommate Benito Hollow said. He didn't know how to say no, Howell said of Wadsworth, who had worked for several NASCAR teams. He loved everybody. He always tried to help everybody. The joint family statement also spoke about Dutton and his son Jack, saying they were deeply loved as well, and their loss is felt by all who knew them. Canadian Jewish group calls for urgent action. CEO wants existing laws to be enforced so Sydney tragedy doesn't happen here. By Catherine Morrison. A Jewish organization is calling on all levels of government to protect communities in Canada following a mass shooting at a Hanukkah celebration in Australia. Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs CEO Noah Shack said in an interview with the Canadian press that the need for action is urgent. Thoughts and prayers can provide some comfort in the moment after a tragedy, but we need action to ensure that the same tragedy doesn't play out here in Canada, Shack said. At least 15 people were killed and at least 38 were wounded in Australia over the weekend during a Hanukkah event at Bondi Beach, in which police said was an attack by a father and son. Police shot the two suspected gunmen. The 50-year-old father died at the scene, and his 24-year-old son is being treated at a Sydney hospital and was charged Wednesday with 59 offenses, including murder and committing a terrorist act. The Integrated Threat Assessment Center, a component of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, said in an intelligence brief on Monday it sees no indication or a specific threat in Canada following the mass shooting, but warned of the realistic possibility of an extremist attack on a Jewish community here. The brief said holiday events, including Hanukkah celebrations, will likely remain an aspirational target across the violent extremist spectrum, intending to attack Western interests, select religious and ethnic communities, and related emblematic sites. It said there is no current information indicating specific threat targeting 2025 holiday events, including against Hanukkah celebrations in Canada or by threat actors or transnational violent extremist groups. The CSIS brief notes some Canadian police forces have said they will put forward a stronger police presence in Jewish communities. Shack said his organization is calling for existing laws to be enforced, noting that the relentless harassment and intimidation of Canadians in neighborhoods, at places of worship, at schools, and daycares has to stop. Police and prosecutors have to be empowered and instructed to hold perp- perpet- perpetrators accountable, and any structural policy or legislative impediments need to be addressed while, of course, protecting our fundamental freedoms, Shack said. If the laws of the land are not being enforced, it's going to not only undermine our safety but our confidence in the justice system. Shack said the governments also need to prioritize community security. He said that requires further investment and optimization of government security grants and the deployment of police and intelligence resources. More action to counter terrorism and radicalization is also needed in a serious way, Shack said. The unchecked glorification of terrorist organization and actions that we've seen has to be curbed, he said. We need to find a way for the removal to be fast-tracked for high-risk individuals linked with foreign terrorist organization to be removed from. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Australian PM vows to curb hate radicalization by Charlotte Gramaclay, Christian Gurnu, and Tristan Laviette. Sydney, hundreds of mourners are bearing bright bouquets and clutching each other in grief gathered at a funeral in Sydney on Thursday for a 10-year-old girl who was gunned down in an anti-Semitic massacre during a Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach. Matilda, whose last name is being withheld at the request of her family, was enjoying a petting zoo at the festivities on Sunday just before she was killed, along with 14 other people, in a mass shooting targeting Jews. The suspects, a father and son, were inspired by the Islamic State group, Australian authorities have said. Beaming photos of Matilda have become a focal point for Australia's grief at one of the worst hate-fueled attacks ever committed in the country. The massacre has prompted a national reckoning about anti-Semitism and questions about whether the country's leaders took seriously enough the threat to Australian Jews. Matilda's parents, who arrived in Australia from Ukraine, moved away from the war-torn Eastern Europe to come here for a good life, Rabbi David Slavin told the Associated Press as he entered the service. They did something that a parent is okay to do, take their child and family event at a Bondi Beach, he added. If it ended this way, it's something for a collective responsibility for every adult in this country. Speaking to reporters in Canberra at the same time Matilda's service began, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese unveiled a tranche of legislative plans he said would curb radicalization and hate. Among his proposals were measures to broaden the definition of hate speech offenses for preachers and leaders who promote violence, to bolster punishments for such crimes, to designate some groups as hateful, and to allow judges to consider hate as an aggravating factor in causes of online threats and harassment. Officials would have greater powers to reject or cancel visas for those who spread hate and division in this country, or would do so if they were allowed to come here, Albanese added. He didn't suggest a timeline for the reforms, citing their legal complexity. there have been organizations which any Australian would look at and say their behavior, their philosophy, and what they are trying to do is about division and has no place in Australia. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke told reporters. And yet, for a generation, no government has been able to successfully take action against them because they have fallen just below the legal threshold. The announcement followed Albi's pledge to tighten Australia's gun controls, which are already some of the toughest in the world. State leaders, too, have promised additional initiatives on firearms and stricter rules for protest gatherings. Still, the fact that Albanese has not attended any of the victims' funerals so far, with local media reporting he has not been invited, despite the presence of other political leaders, hints at the fury some Australian Jews feel towards the leader. Albanese said measures his government have already enacted, including a ban in February on Nazi salutes, shown he has taken the threat of anti-Semitism seriously. I, of course, acknowledge that more could have been done, and I accept my responsibility for the part that as Prime Minister of Australia, Albanese said Thursday. But what I also do is accept my responsibility to lead the nation and to unite the nation. Meanwhile, investigators continue to probe the suspected government's links in Australia and their travel to the Philippines before the attack, said Christy Barrett, the country's police chief. Authorities earlier divulged that the younger shooter suspect, Naveed Akram, 24, was investigated for 6 months by Australia's security services in 2019. The older shooter, Sajid Akram, 50, who was shot dead on Sunday, had amassed the guns used in a massacre legally. His gun license was granted in 2023 after his son came to the attention of the authorities. A requiem for democracy in Hong Kong. Critics' conviction wasn't surprising, but it shows that one country, two systems is long gone. By Martin Reg Khan. There was a time that Hong Kong held out hope. Hope for a free press, hope for a free people, hope for the democratization that might be a model for the rule across much of Asia. Today, the personification of the hope languishes behind bars in Hong Kong. Jimmy Lee, the defiant newspaper publisher who chronicled Hong Kong's democracy movement in editions of the People Apple Daily, was convicted this week of sedition. His crime? Allegedly trying to topple distant rulers in Beijing while pressing for self-rule and representation government in home in Hong Kong. Lay's conviction was perhaps a foregone conclusion, but there was a time when expectations were different for the former British colony. Decades ago, Britain and China negotiated a peaceful transition, a treaty spelling out the handover of power from the era of colonialism to communism, but also commercialism. The rubric was one country, two systems. The creative ambiguity allowed for a tension between the two legal systems, the common law system of Hong Kong alongside the communist hierarchy and bureaucracy of Beijing. Underpinning this treaty was its primary article, an article of faith and a matter of belief, that Hong Kong's status as a manufacturing hub and commercial entrepot was too valuable for Beijing to take for granted. Few believed China would ever kill the goose that laid the golden egg by meddling with Hong Kong's independent judiciary and fiddling with its political legacy. Others, however, weren't so sure. Lei was one of them. A stowaway from the mainland, he landed in Hong Kong determined to secure his freedom but also his fortune. Later, he risked both by investing in a free press, building the Apple Daily into an intermediate and irreverent campaigner for Hong Kong's democratization as guaranteed by the handover from the British to Chinese control. There was a time in the aftermath of the 1997 handover that Hong Kong held great promise, if not a bastion of freedom, at least a building block for democracy tied to a foundation of law and order. It was a freedom for goods and services, if not quite people, but animated Hong Kong's quest for law and order. The goal was stability and predictability, if not yet full democracy. For if the goose was to continue producing gold, there must be transparency and certainty in government. Corporations wanted to avoid the opacity and corruption that bedeviled their countries across Asia and the world, so Hong Kong's stability as a financial center was considered a safe bet. When I took over Star's Hong Kong Bureau in 1999, the democratization movement was still in full flower. It was led by Democracy Party and its energetic founder, Martin Lee, and energized by the Apple Daily and its rambunctious publisher Lai. I met with Lee and his family early on, but the balance of power already started to change as the ground shifted beneath them. Hong Kong's status as a manufacturing powerhouse was eroded by the explosive growth of neighboring Shenzhen in mainland China, and its banking power was soon rivaled by the financial muscle of Shanghai. With China's economic rise, Hong Kong's relative clout diminished. The final blow came when China's political metamorphosis under President Xi Jinping, who consolidated communist rule by crushing dissent on mainland and outlawing demarketization in Hong Kong. A free press and free elections are vital to democracy and its judiciary. The collapse of Hong Kong's judicial independence has been a long time coming, notwithstanding the self-serving retaliations of former Canadian Supreme Court Justice Beverly McLean, who foolishly served as a foreign judge at Hong Kong's highest court until recently. Perhaps China will ultimately show mercy, or more likely use Lei as a bargaining chip, just as it did when incarcerated Canadian citizens. Whatever Lei's fate, he faces the possibility of life imprisonment. The only certainty is that this week's court ruling is a requiem for death of democracy in Hong Kong. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 9th issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Donald. Thank you for listening.